In kindergarten, you thought of nap time, coloring, and snacks.
But now, we think of tests, stress, and our next due dates.
But once you leave school, all you're really thinking is, why did I need to know that?
Across the globe, every student has asked this question at some point in their education.
In the US and Canada, focus is split between testing and attempts at all-encompassing education. In East Asia, the focus is almost entirely on tests. And in Europe, there is a focus on individuality. Individuality. Doesn't that seem like it should be included as a right along with the freedom so iconic of the US?
When people think of the US, they think of freedom. And then when it comes to education, sure, you could say there are a lot of course options, but there really aren't.
We're all high schoolers, so we've probably seen something like this, or any of these. And you may have noticed they all look kind of the same. One may argue that these are only certain high schools and this shouldn't apply to all of the US, but in fact, these are from all over the country.
You see, going to school in the US goes something like this. You start out in pre-K and kindergarten, learning basic skills in each of the core subjects. Then you move on to elementary school, where your knowledge in these core subjects are more developed. When you attend middle school, you start to get some options, but those really lead you nowhere. You may also skip a few steps forward, but eventually you'll have to take these courses anyway. Seems pretty linear, doesn't it?
Classes that aren't core or tied to core classes are valued less than the ones that are. This is quite literally demonstrated by the GPA system. Some classes are worth more, and because of this, if one wishes to find success in education, they are confined to the linear path of the American education system.
We can use ourselves for an example. Izzy's track, Gabby's basketball, Sarah's swimming, and Eric's dancing are all not ideal due to them having a GPA value of 4.0.
Now our neighbors, Canada, are generally stereotyped as being better than us in many ways. Kindness, hockey, making syrup, everything important. But do they outdo us in education? Their education system is a lot like ours, somewhat streamlined, all until 11th grade. In 11th grade, Canadian students choose what life path they wish to pursue.
This decision is made at about the same time in Finland, once you're around 16 or 17.
You move on to upper level education, where one can choose their life path. Due to minimal workload given, students are encouraged to participate in extracurricular activities, which basically allows them to pursue their own life path. However, if you want even earlier life planning, you've got Germany.
Usually seen by the public as a technologically advanced country that is more developed than many others in the world, Germany's education system has been greatly successful. What's so special about their education system?
In Germany, students start out attending a typical Volksschule, or their elementary school. But in 4th grade, students must decide which type of school they will attend for 5th grade, Gymnasium, Realschule, or Hauptschule. Each of these systems cater to different types of people and allows every student to pursue a path that best suits them. This choice determines their life path and is usually made with lots of thought and planning. You might think it's dangerous to make such a big decision early on, but few Germans ever go back on their decision, and people can move between different school types based on their performance. This system of vocational and academic education has led to a more diverse and adept workforce in Germany because they allow their students to be skilled and successful in more than one way. East Asia, though, it's a different story.
They not only streamline their education system, they do it vigorously. Most of East Asia's education system is revolved around test preparation. In fact, China's education system revolves around preparing students for a test called Gaokao, essentially an SAT on steroids that defines a student's life. In Taiwan, the education system has been criticized for being too focused on math and science, and in Korea, examination pressure causes students to fit into a predetermined mold.
中国的教育可能就是把孩子只是培养成学习的那种机器，只会学习。然后就是因为我刚从中国来的时候，我对自己未来要做什么也是很不清楚的。就是我相信大部分中国孩子会跟我差不多。
Standardized testing is a common occurrence in many schools around the world. However, many students do not like this because it often means
sitting in a room for hours on end, bubbling in answers to ridiculous questions, and sitting there, staring into space, wondering why on earth you need to take this test. This is testing. This practice is far from helpful, does not accurately represent students' intelligence, benefits the wealthy, and places additional stress on the shoulders of already stressed students. Standardized testing teaches an A, B, C, D mentality, and forces students to think and answer in a way that testers want to hear, but life is not multiple choice.
Of the American standardized tests, the most important ones are probably the SAT and the ACT, tests that almost define you. The US does not have specific in-school classes dedicated to preparing for these tests, but outside of school, there are many prep courses offered, as well as private tutors, which benefit those with more money.
In East Asia, standardized tests do practically the same thing. In China, the Gaokao is the most important of the tests. Described by high school teacher Michael Levy as an SAT on steroids, the Gaokao is a government-proctored exam over 2 days and is the sole determinant of college acceptance. The average student spends 8 to 10 hours every day preparing for this test for the entirety of their high school career. Like the US, the Gaokao gives an advantage to the rich who can afford even more classes and preparation or opt out completely by sending their child abroad to college overseas. In South Korea,
Students spend every ounce of free time studying due to the pressure of examination. In fact, heavy pressure from these exams causes one of the highest teen suicide rates of all countries. So much depends on these tests that students strive to be the perfect test takers rather than the perfect individuals. This takes away individuality as much as streamlining does.
Europe has fewer standardized tests, all of which are only used for finding out which areas have a less developed education system. Tests are not the only thing many students despise. There's also homework. Homework is school's way of making students practice what they learn in school. However, is it all useful?
despite the theory that the standard amount of homework given should be approximately 10 minutes times the grade level per week, the amount of homework from one country to the next varies greatly. In the US, students are given about 6.1 hours of homework per week. In Canada, 5.5 hours. In Germany and Finland, 4.7 and 2.8 hours respectively, 2.9 hours in South Korea, and a whopping 13.75 hours in China.
You may notice that each of these stacks is larger than the suggested stack of homework. This is because even the lowest amount of homework, Finland, at 2.8 hours, is still 1.22 hours over the suggested amount. Homework has a huge impact on families and their relationships. Here's an example of an average family eating dinner. Over time, the amount of homework these students receive will accumulate and directly impact the family. Notice how the family continues to change over time. The homework these students receive causes them to be doing homework from the time they get home to the time they go to sleep, completely eliminating the possibility of spending time with their family.
Homework, tests, and studying leads to stress, which leads to sleep deprivation and exhaustion, memory loss, headaches, and stomach problems.
We believe that education systems are meant to provide for students, that students should be happy, that anyone from anywhere will be able to find success, that the hours of school they sit through will influence their lives significantly and in a positive way. To reach this, we must
find a balance. With all the problems in the education systems, there is no single solution. However, if a balance is found, we will be able to vastly improve all education systems. We must learn to balance pushing students to be their best
without overwhelming them with too much stress.
We must learn to balance the values of learning core subjects
and the importance of art and creativity. Only using a balanced combination of all the education systems will we be able to reach the system that best supports and educates our student body.
Like Finland, we must learn to teach in more diverse ways in order to ensure all students are able to understand a lesson.
Like Germany, there needs to be a variety in courses that allow people to split off into studies that best suit their abilities and interests.
Like East Asia, we must learn to expect students' best work and motivate them to be the best and the smartest that they can be.
Like the US, there must be equity between genders, immigrants, and people of all social backgrounds.
As a whole, all education systems need to pay more attention to the mental health and stress levels of students, and not just the results the students are producing.
We also need to focus more upon the teamwork and collaboration of students as opposed to forcing students to compete for a top grade. Instead of separating students, we should be focusing on teaching them to work with others.
There is no perfect education system, but with commitment and effort, we can change global education for the better.